After beating Alabama last week, will Oklahoma look past Missouri on Saturday? Let's talk about it on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And yes, I'm part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. And on today's program, really when it comes down to it, when it comes to Eli Drinkwitz, it's all going to be up to him. And by the way, I'm going to give you a master class on how to destroy a coaching rumor later in the show. Also, this Oklahoma-Missouri matchup in many ways, at least on one side of the football, is going to be a strength on a strength. And you know what? Before I start the show quickly, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And yes, December 1st is the big drop date for those of us in Missouri. But you know what? Let's start talking about this Missouri-Oklahoma football game. And I have to say, I do kind of like the spot for Missouri. Oklahoma coming off a dramatic victory over Alabama last week. Well, surely they can beat little old Missouri with their third-string quarterback, right? Right? You listen, I'm obviously being a little bit sarcastic there. I'm hoping that's obviously Oklahoma's mentality. And, well, it's certainly the spot would have maybe been even better for Missouri had LSU been, well, as good as I thought they were going to be this offseason. LSU coming to Gaylord Stadium next week. And, you know, Brent Venables is certainly going to remind his locker room of last season, by the way, where, of course, Missouri took down Oklahoma with a backup quarterback. My question is, again, human nature being what it is, if I'm in the Oklahoma locker room, I consider myself to be part of one of the legendary programs of all time, and we just took down one of the legendary programs of all time. Am I actually going to believe Brent Venables? And, of course, with the amount of turnover, how much leadership even remembers last season. Of course, quarterback John Mattier not on the roster last season for Oklahoma. Their quarterback last season, Jackson Arnold, of course, now with the Auburn Tigers. What's interesting to me, speaking of the spot of this game, I'll give you a little preview of the SEC squad, by the way. I end up showing up maybe 9-10 minutes into the show. By the way, my younger daughter had a tonsillectomy this week, so I've been kind of, picking my spots when it comes to the podcast. So apologies if I'm a little bit all over the place in terms of scheduling, and also with the squad, I kind of had to pop in and pop out. But if you don't see me at the beginning, don't worry, I am coming. But again, the point was a little bit of a preview there. John Williams from Locked On Sooners and I, neither one of us are feeling all that confident about our team. So maybe to my point on that, earlier in the season, this Oklahoma-Missouri line's actually been out for a long time. 7.5 is the line over at FanDuel Sportsbook currently. Interestingly enough, a couple months ago, that was the same line, and I was arguing with my Locked On Sooners guy, not only John, but Jay Smith as well, going, hey, I think that line's too high, guys. I think Missouri is better than that. And quite honestly, now I'm thinking, well, maybe the line's about right, and they're the ones who aren't confident. So I'll be interested to talk to John Williams, by the way, on tomorrow's crossover edition of Locked On Mizzou. But when it comes to this matchup, I really think that when Missouri has the football, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because Missouri's strength, of course, offensively, how about Ahmad Hardy? Just ran for 300 yards. And, of course, Jamal Roberts, too, just that Missouri rushing attack in general. Well, Nate Edwards from Rock M Nation had some good numbers here on this Oklahoma rushing defense. According to S&P Plus, Oklahoma is #1 with a bullet in the entire country in rushing defense. And breaking it down here, also 5th in yards per rush, 2nd in EPA per rush, which is a more advanced statistic, and then 3rd in stuff rate. In other words, the amount of times that a rush gains nothing or loses yardage. That's something that obviously Missouri, when its rushing attack doesn't get going, this has been the case for at least the past couple years, if not the entire Eli Drinkwitz era. Well, when Missouri is losing yardage on early downs, boy, that really messes up their offense and is kind of the downside of maybe the outside zone at times, I would say. But if there is one thing that the Sooners do, if you do find a gap in that rushing attack on occasion, well, the Sooners tend to give up quite a few explosive plays. When you actually get a successful run against the Sooners, well, the percentage of time that leads to a big, big chunk of yardage is surprisingly high based on all of those numbers that I just gave you. Now, of course, those opportunities are few and far between. So what that tells me is it is going to be up to the Missouri offensive line to at least give Ahmad Hardy a chance, at least get him a yard downfield before he's facing contact. Literally 1 yard. If you give him that, that's going to be a big deal for Missouri, because as good as Ahmad Hardy is at breaking tackles, getting the yardage that's there, and getting yards after contact, well, then he's going to eventually break 1 or 2 or 3 for big gains, because then Missouri will be able to be patient, because if they got 2nd and 13, then all of a sudden it's harder to stay with your game plan in terms of running the football. And that's obviously, I think, at Oklahoma, with Matt Zollers likely making another start here. Obviously, Missouri's going to want to lean on that rushing attack. So, and speaking of that, by the way, another strategic note I would make here, when Missouri gets the ball past midfield in this game, hey, you're a touchdown plus underdog here. If you get past midfield, or at the very least past the Oklahoma 40, I think the Tigers should basically become a service academy, or one of those high schools that never kicks the football, because not only is Missouri's place kicking shaky, but I just simply think going for it on 4th down gives Missouri, as the underdog in this team, a much better chance to pull the upset. And not on top of that, Missouri's punting has been nothing to write home about either. So to me, Missouri has to be, on one hand, somewhat conservative, rushing the football and not putting too much of the game on Matt Zollers. And then on the other side of the coin, I would say Missouri needs to be aggressive on 4th downs. If it's 4th and 2, 4th and 3, and you're looking at a 37-yard field goal, forget it. There's no way that Missouri can possibly afford to miss a short field goal in this game. I think they can afford to get stuffed on 4th down, because to the lack of confidence from my Sooner guys, that Oklahoma offense hasn't always been everything it's been hyped up to be in the preseason either. Also, that Missouri defense is a great unit in its own right. So to me, just based on how I think this game's going to play out, how I think Missouri is sort of like Oklahoma did last week to the Crimson Tide, they're going to have to steal a few possessions. And doing so, I think it's going to have to be by going for it on 4th down. Will that actually pay off? We'll have to see. But if I'm Missouri, I'm going to be much more aggressive than Eli Drinkwitz normally is. But you know what? I have more to talk about on this game, including, well, we're talking a lot about rushing attacks. How about the other side and John Mattier's ability to rush the football? Also, in a game of coaching musical chairs, Eli Drinkwitz is going to have a chair. The question is, does he want it? So let's break down this coaching landscape even further here as the show goes along. But first, December 1st is almost here. Yes, FanDuel will be live in Missouri on December 1st, but you can go there now and check out all of their offerings, including lots of NBA action. And when you miss the start of any game, by the way, you can always get in on some different types of action with live bets, even combine some stuff into a same-game parlay. And right now, hey, perfect timing for all of us in Missouri. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So definitely head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now, statistically, while Missouri certainly has a top 10% of the country type of defense, an elite defense, well, statistically, Oklahoma's is even better. But despite Missouri's struggles in recent weeks at times offensively, well, statistically, Missouri isn't too far off of that defense, believe it or not, and is ranked better than that Oklahoma offense, which started off hot, and then seemingly John Mattier injured his hand, and, well, I don't know if the Sooners have been quite the same since. And that Oklahoma running attack really the entire time, I think, has been a little bit up and down. And also, John Mattier, no stranger to running the football himself, and actually his scrambling game, his quarterback-designed rushes, well, that's definitely a big part of Oklahoma's offense. The good news for Missouri is under Corey Batoon, Missouri's done really an excellent job for the most part of containing scrambling quarterbacks. That was certainly the case against Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. Definitely not a reason that Missouri lost that game. In fact, that was a reason that Missouri hung around in that football game, I would say. So definitely something in the Tigers' favor there. And you know what? On the coaching carousel, I will say this. If Eli Drinkwitz wants a chair in this game of musical chairs, well, the music is not going to stop. He's going to have somewhere to sit, whether it is Penn State, LSU, Florida, perhaps somewhere else. Auburn, I believe, that'd be the fourth more realistic option. I just don't think Arkansas is a realistic option, for example. But the question is, does Eli Drinkwitz want it? Again, let's break this down here, because with Mike Elko off the table, with Kirk Cignetti off the table, Matt Rule, various other guys who have made it clear that, well, they're going to be staying put. Basically, if you want to put Lane Kiffin up in a tier by himself, well, in terms of the market, I'd have to agree with you. Clearly, he's the number one option at Florida, perhaps at LSU as well. But once you get past Lane Kiffin, is anybody more desirable than Eli Drinkwitz? I don't really think so. The other guys out there on the market, perhaps, again, rumors say that they're out there. How much of that is actually true? Well, if you listen to Brent Key, for example, down at Georgia Tech, he's saying, hey, cut me open and see what colors bleed out of me. In other words, hey, I love Georgia Tech. I graduated from here. I'm not going anywhere, is what he's signaling to the world. So that may take yet another guy with high major head coaching experience off the table. Seemingly the only other guy in this cycle who has coaching experience is Jeff Brom from Louisville. And again, there's three guys we're talking about here: Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, Jeff Brom. Well, there's still one spot available. Now the drop-off's fairly dramatic there, because now you're talking about coordinators, guys like Brian Hartline, the current wide receivers coach and offensive coordinator at Ohio State. You're talking about Sumrall, the Tulane coach, that type of level, guys who have done it at the mid-major, the group of five level, but not necessarily, they've not been head coaches at the high major level, much less the SEC or Big Ten level. So clearly, you just look at the landscape here. If Eli Drinkwitz wants a job, well, he's going to get another job. Obviously, Missouri would be more than happy to have him back, and I am certainly in that camp. I can't imagine anybody who would be happy if Eli Drinkwitz left. And I will say this, a lot of, rumors going around, not only at Penn State, that it looks like Drinkwitz is probably at or very near the very top of the list at Penn State. Again, that makes all the sense in the world when you just look at the marketplace right now. But I also had some other people reaching out to me from one of these schools saying, hey, I heard that, Drinkwitz is sounding like a done deal to this place. And in fact, he's had another interview here. And I was immediately not really trusting this bit of information, I have to say. And this is a trustworthy person, but that just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I had to follow up, especially when this person said, now there is this other thing though, and that Drinkwitz actually makes more than what we're willing to pay. So that made me immediately stop in my tracks and go, now wait a second here. Let's think about this logically. If Drinkwitz really had his second interview somewhere, first of all, I didn't believe that initially. But then when you add the detail of, well, they want him to take a pay cut. I'm sorry, Drinkwitz is going somewhere where he's going to take a pay cut. For as much as Drinkwitz said, hey, it's really not about my own personal salary as far as what he would like to see at Missouri, I believe him, by the way. That makes complete sense to me. What doesn't make sense is, well, I'm going to leave and I'm going to take a pay cut. That is not going to happen. I can't think of anyone who's ever done that in the history of football. I think his agent, Jimmy Sexton, would probably rather tie him to a goalpost for the next few weeks than let him do that, number one. And number two, Drinkwitz a guy, hey, he's got all the money he needs right now, I'm sure of that. But taking a pay cut, yeah, that's not in the cards. Not with somebody who has any, well, not only an ego, but some sense too. So again, when you hear these rumors out there, especially when you get multiple pieces of information from the same place, start putting them together and see if they actually make sense. And by the way, speaking of actually figuring out what's true versus what's false, well, sometimes sarcasm and humor can be a little bit difficult for people to navigate. And well, I didn't even bring this up yesterday because I thought it was pretty obvious that Eli Drinkwitz was being flippant, as he called it. But on Tiger Talk yesterday, Drinkwitz did clarify he was talking about Matt Zollers and Donovan Alubade just kind of being flippant the other day, saying, hey, we got to make sure we pay him, that kind of thing. Well, he just wanted to clarify. He said, quote, I just want everybody to know those guys are getting paid. We're going to keep those two. Nobody stress about that. Well, number one, that's great to hear, especially Donovan Alubade has become a fan favorite, I would say, pretty quickly. Definitely a podcast favorite. There's no doubt about that. I'll speak for myself. But it is also funny to hear in this new world coaches openly talking about, hey, don't worry, we're actually paying the players to everybody. Just in case you thought we weren't, we're paying the players. Still tough, still a little bit surreal to hear that as somebody who grew up in the previous world of, no, we're not paying the players. What are you talking about? That's nonsense. No, we didn't give him any Oakley sweatpants. What are you talking about? See, that was the world I grew up in, and well, this is certainly a new world for better or for worse. And by the way, let's take a little bit more of a magnifying glass to this Eli Drinkwitz situation. In fact, when Drinkwitz left App State a few years ago to come to Missouri, well, some people pointed out that his comments were pretty similar to what he said in the last couple of days regarding the Missouri job. Should that make you worried? Well, let's talk about it. And yes, really break down this in very granular detail coming up in just a little bit on the program. But first, I got to talk about game time because, of course, college football is the best, but sometimes getting tickets can be the worst, and that's where game time comes in. You know what? I'm thinking about heading to Fayetteville for the Arkansas game, pull up some tickets really quickly on game time. Here's the beauty of it. No hidden fees. I know right now, heck, 50-yard line, $57. That's all in pricing, by the way. No hidden fees. I can click on it right now, see the exact view of my seats. By the way, it shows me that it's a great deal, 7% off currently. I got to say I'm getting tempted to head down to that last game for Missouri this regular season. You know what? If you're tempted to, you got to use Game Time without a doubt for all of your ticket needs, whether it is football, basketball, concerts, anything you can imagine. Take the guesswork out of buying all your live event tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download Game Time today. So on these Eli Drinkwitz comments from a few years ago when he was asked, well, App State was going into its bowl game, I believe, you know, the rumors were swirling that Drinkwitz was a candidate, not just at Missouri, but other places as well. He was asked about it. And I have to say, if you do the Zapruder film-like comparison of Drinkwitz comments, well, just from a couple days ago about Missouri versus what he said talking about the App State job, well, there were a lot of similarities. He's saying, hey, we got a great thing going here at App State. Hey, we got a great thing going here at Missouri. So check that box. Hey, my family loves it at both places. Check that box. And there were some other very, very similar statements to the point where you're going, wait a second, was that about App State or was it about Missouri? And if that makes you nervous, well, I would just say it doesn't change much for me because I don't really know what else you could expect him to say. And most importantly, there was a difference between the App State comments from a few years ago and Drinkwitz comments this time. There was a caveat that Drinkwitz added in there the previous time around. He said, after he said, hey, my family loves it here, we love it at App State, we believe we're building something great here, he said, at the same time, this was very much like back in Curb Your Enthusiasm when Larry David would say, having said that, so at the same time, Drinkwitz then went on to say, it would be, for my family, I basically have to listen to these offers and we'll see what happens in the future. He didn't have any of those types of caveats in his Missouri statements. Now, the negative-oriented person could say, well, maybe he just learned his lesson and to be even more coy and even more guarded in his statements this time around. That's certainly a logical possibility that I cannot refute. I'm just telling you, if we're going to make the Zapruder film-like comparisons, there was a key difference there and definitely made it sound like Drinkwitz, yes, I'm very much going to be listening to other jobs. There was no real caveat there this time around. Does that mean it's impossible that Drinkwitz leaves? No, I wouldn't say that. I'll just say this, and this is something Gabe DeArmond at Power Mizzou has said. I'll echo it. I'm getting the same type of information with the people I talk to. Everybody around Missouri seems to think that Eli Drinkwitz is going to come back, but boy, everybody I talk to outside of Missouri just seems to assume that he's going to leave. And I do want to say assume because I don't know that anybody outside of the program, whether it's with Penn State or LSU or Florida, wherever it might be, I don't think that any of these people are necessarily talking to people inside Missouri. They certainly don't have better ends with Eli Drinkwitz than anybody around this program. So I think a lot of it is an assumption, just sort of still some leftover old thinking from, well, if you can go from, you know, a whatever tier you think Missouri is, SEC program, to a higher tier program in LSU or whatever it might be, then that's an automatic. I'm not sure that it's an automatic anymore, especially for the specific circumstances in which Eli Drinkwitz finds himself. But hey, I'm glad your circumstances led you to listening to Locked On Mizzou today. Thanks for making this show your first listen today. And for your second listen, frankly, check out Locked On Chiefs, Locked On Cardinals, Locked On Royals. It's all here. Maybe you're a Chicago Bears fan who went to Mizzou. What do I know? There's a million different options out there. Of course, the NHL is in full swing. All I know is the best place to hear it all, the #1 sports podcasting network, and that is Locked On. And you know what? Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou. And next time, I'll be here again. Crossover, Locked On Sooners. See you next time, right here on Locked On Mizzou.